In the shadowed months of early 1941, while much of Europe lay under the tightening grip of Nazi occupation, a little-known British initiative was already reshaping the course of clandestine warfare. The Special Operations Executive, Churchill's secret weapon for sabotage and subversion, was quietly constructing one of its most ambitious networks inside occupied France. Known by its codename Prosper, or officially the Prosper Physician Circuit, it would become one of the largest and most influential Allied espionage efforts of the war, before collapsing in a mysterious silence that has perplexed historians for decades. The story begins with Colonel Maurice Buckmaster's Section F, the SOE branch dedicated to infiltrating and arming the French resistance. In February 1941, Buckmaster approved the deployment of a young, charismatic wireless-trained operative named Francis Suttle. Suttle was tasked with building a unified espionage structure across Paris and its surrounding regions, a daunting mission in a city crowded with German patrols, collaborators, and the increasingly feared Sicherheitsdienst, or SD, the Nazi intelligence service. Despite the dangers, Suttle moved through Paris under an assumed identity, contacting key resistance figures and recruiting couriers capable of navigating the labyrinthine streets and rural rail lines. By late 1941 and early 1942, Prosper grew with astonishing speed. The network developed courier chains stretching from Paris to Orleans, Tours, and the Loire Valley. Safe houses, simple apartments, back rooms of cafes, farmhouses hidden beyond rivers, served as meeting points for sabotage planners and wireless operators. One SOE handler later wrote in his diary that Prosper grew like ivy through the cracks of occupied France, a testament to how deeply embedded Suttle's people had become. Yet beneath this success, subtle signs of danger echoed through the network. German counterintelligence units had begun to adapt. UBWEHR and SD radio monitoring teams improved their ability to triangulate clandestine transmitters, narrowing their search radius to mere blocks. Paris, especially after curfews, became perilous territory for anyone carrying forged papers or unusual equipment. Prosper's operators, working with bulky Type 3 Mark II suitcase radios, often transmitted from makeshift setups in attics or small apartments, aware that every extra minute on the air risked detection. Still, their work continued. Reports flowed into London detailing troop movements, ammunition shipments, and the tightening German defenses along the Channel coast. Among these messages came warnings, subtle but worrying, about irregular arrests in peripheral resistance groups and German agents posing as British operatives. A courier recalled a cryptic note left by a contact in May 1942, "Someone is listening who should not be." But in the urgency of wartime operations, such signals were often dismissed as the nervousness of inexperienced agents. Historically, what makes Prosper's story so compelling is the combination of its remarkable expansion and the fragile secrecy holding it together. The network's size, over 90 known members, became both its strength and its vulnerability. Historians now argue that the rapid growth created operational gaps. Too many couriers using predictable routes, too many meetings held in routine locations, too many wireless transmissions from recognizable patterns. German security services were patient, tracking movements one by one, mapping Prosper's structure with chilling precision. In June 1942, the first confirmed sign of a breach appeared. An SOE report logged from London recorded unusual German interest in the Paris resistance circuits. Around the same time, Suttle sent a message warning that the Paris region seemed restless, a coded acknowledgement of increased surveillance. Yet still, Prosper continued its preparations for what London hoped would be an eventual uprising in support of Allied landings. Then, suddenly, transmissions began to change. Some messages arrived distorted, shortened, or lacking authentication phrases. Others went completely unanswered. Couriers sent to deliver information or retrieve microfilm discovered empty apartments, vanished contacts, and doors left ajar as if occupants had fled mid-packing. By July 1942, Suttle himself disappeared into the void of German custody, although London did not yet know it. After the war, captured German records revealed that the SD had systematically infiltrated the network, using false contacts and intercepted communications. But the exact moment when Prosper was compromised and how deeply remains debated. Some historians believe a single double agent began the collapse. Others argue it was a perfect storm: radio detection teams, captured couriers, and the immense operational pressure the SOE placed on its networks. Today, the fall of Prosper stands as one of the most consequential intelligence failures of the war, not because of a single mistake, but because of a series of overlooked warnings. The silence that followed the network's last transmissions in mid-1942 left Allied command wondering how an organization so vast could vanish almost overnight. And yet, Prosper would not be the only network to disappear this way. As 1942 unfolded, thousands of miles away in North Africa, another Allied spy unit prepared to report on Axis supply movements, unknowingly heading toward its own mysterious silence. In the shifting sands of early 1942, as Axis and Allied forces clashed across North Africa, a lesser-known American intelligence effort was quietly taking shape behind the prominent tank battles and supply convoys. While Rommel's Africa Corps dominated the headlines, the newly formed Office of Strategic Services, the OSS, was laying the foundation for one of its first fully independent field networks in the region. This covert unit, operating under the unassuming designation Tunis Forward Observation Detail, would become one of the earliest examples of America's entry into the world of wartime espionage. And like others of its generation, it would meet a sudden and unexplained silence that continues to puzzle military historians. Before the U.S. had even completed its buildup for Operation Torch, small OSS detachments were quietly inserted alongside British intelligence elements in Algeria and Tunisia. The goal was simple: gather precise information on Axis supply routes feeding Rommel's operations. The challenge, however, was immense. North Africa's vast distances, extreme heat, and limited communications infrastructure made clandestine work uniquely dangerous. Radio waves carried farther in desert conditions, making transmitters easier to triangulate. Local loyalties were uncertain, shaped by tribal boundaries, colonial legacies, and survival under occupation. The Tunis Forward Observation Detail consisted of only 7 men, 3 OSS officers, 2 radio operators, and 2 local guides familiar with the trade caravans moving between Gabes, Tozeur, and the interior oases. Their equipment was sparse: a Type 3 OSS suitcase radio, a Browning high-power pistol each, and a handful of forged French identification cards. Their mission brief from early March 1942 reads: monitor Axis fuel, munitions, and armored movements along coastal and inland corridors. Prioritize convoy counts and timings. Maintain concealment at all costs. Straightforward on paper, exceptionally risky in the field. Operating from a network of abandoned farmhouses and dried riverbeds, the team began transmitting coded reports back to Allied command in Algiers. Their early intelligence proved accurate enough to shape British patrol patterns. One such message identified a fuel convoy moving from Sfax toward the Mareth line, allowing RAF reconnaissance to verify and later hinder its dispersal. A senior British officer later noted in his diary, "American reports from southeast Tunisia are promising, if they survive long enough to continue." Yet challenges mounted quickly. German security patrols, particularly elements of the 90th Light Division, grew increasingly aggressive in the Gabes region. They regularly stopped travelers, scanned the horizon for unusual movement, and questioned anyone carrying unusual papers or equipment. One OSS operator wrote in a field notebook, "We do not fear the patrols themselves. We fear a question we cannot answer or a pocket we forgot to empty." The desert was both ally and enemy, wide open for observation but impossible to hide in for long. By April 1942, the team's transmissions became more urgent. One message, logged by OSS headquarters, described anomalous Axis logistics behavior. German convoys traveling at night without lights, escorted by armored cars with their markings concealed. The Americans speculated these might be emergency fuel transports intended to support Rommel's push toward the Gazala line. But before they could verify the pattern, something changed. On the morning of April 17th, the OSS station in Algiers received a final, unusually short burst from the Tunis team. The message, only partially decrypted, read, "Observe diverted movement. Gabes Road, unexpected Axis presence, relocating west." The last authentication key was correct. The signal strength matched previous transmissions. But the tone felt hurried, almost clipped, as if the operator had cut off mid-sentence. After that, silence. 4 hours, then days, Algiers attempted to re-establish contact. Standard emergency codes were broadcast. No acknowledgement returned. British detachments operating west of Gabes saw no trace of the Americans or their equipment. Weeks later, after German forces withdrew from the area, Allied patrols searched known hide sites used by the OSS detail. In several of them, personal effects remained untouched: canteens, empty ration tins, a French newspaper dated the week of the disappearance. But the radios and coded notebooks were gone. Post-war analysis offered several possibilities. The most common theory suggests that a German motorized patrol intercepted one of the group's guides, forcing him to reveal the team's locations. Others argue the Americans may have attempted to relocate too close to Axis fortifications and were either captured or killed before managing another transmission. Yet some Allied intelligence officers noted anomalies. No German records mention capturing OSS personnel in that region during that time. No documents describe confiscated radios matching the American models. And no graves were ever identified. One OSS historian later reflected, "In North Africa, the desert swallows what it desires. Men, vehicles, entire battles have disappeared in its wind." Today, the disappearance of the Tunis forward observation detail stands as one of the earliest and most perplexing losses of American intelligence in World War II. But this was only the beginning. In the same months that the Tunis network fell silent, deep inside the French interior, another SOE circuit was encountering its own shadows, warnings of a double agent and a vanishing chain of safe houses that would soon lead to one of the war's most enigmatic collapses. By late 1942, as German forces tightened their control across occupied France, Allied intelligence networks faced an invisible adversary every bit as dangerous as tanks or aircraft, the German Sicherheitsdienst. In this tense landscape, the SOE's scientist network emerged as one of the most promising circuits in the Loire Valley. Tasked with monitoring German river logistics and the increasingly active railway arteries feeding the Atlantic Wall, scientists operated with a precision that quickly drew praise from London. But beneath its early achievements lay a growing sense of unease, subtle signs that something within the network was shifting or watching. Scientist was established under the guidance of Section F, the SOE's French operations branch, in the autumn of 1942. Its core team consisted of 3 field operatives and a network of local resistance sympathizers who provided shelter, forged documents, and access to railway yards along the Loire. Their primary objective was simple in description but perilous in execution: track German barge traffic moving fuel, munitions, and personnel along the river, and identify patterns that might reveal upcoming military operations. Their wireless operator, a quiet former engineer named Gerard Marchand, transmitted from a rotating series of rural barns and mill houses outside Saumur. He used a Type A Mark III set hidden in a wooden crate of spare machinery parts. Each transmission required careful timing. No more than 20 minutes on air, ideally less. German direction-finding trucks were known to sweep the region at night, stopping at farms, silencing dogs with chloroform, and interrogating owners under the glow of vehicle lamps. Scientist members learned to work in absolute darkness, packing radios and code pads at the first rumble of distant engines. The network's intelligence was highly valued. Reports detailing German use of the Saumur-Tours rail corridor helped RAF planners refine night bombing routes. In one intercepted diary entry from a British signals officer, he wrote, "The Loire team is precise to the minute. Their railway counts match aerial recon with uncanny accuracy." By November 1942, Scientist was considered one of Section F's quiet successes, not as large as Prosper, but more disciplined, more careful. Yet, around the same time, troubling indicators began to surface. A courier returning from a meeting near Angers reported seeing the same unfamiliar man at 2 separate train stations, hours apart, watching the platforms with unusual focus. A resistance safehouse keeper claimed that German policemen had begun asking pointed questions about recent visitors. None of this constituted proof, but in the world of clandestine work, intuition often mattered as much as evidence. The first overt warning arrived in early December, a brief, coded message sent from Marchand's radio signaling possible infiltration. Presence internal anomaly. Evaluate courier routes. Reduce movement. London acknowledged the message but responded with operational reminders rather than emergency measures. After the war, historians would debate whether this response reflected overconfidence, miscommunication, or simply the strain of managing dozens of circuits under mounting German pressure. A week later, scientists' transmissions changed. The messages came shorter, more hurried. One lacked the customary security check string, an alarming deviation. London requested immediate confirmation. None came. Around this time, something stranger occurred on the ground. When a nearby resistance group attempted to reconnect with scientists' main courier hub, they found the usual meeting barn empty, hay scattered, as if someone had departed in haste. A lantern, still warm, sat beside fresh bicycle tracks leading toward the river. No further clues were found. RAF reconnaissance aircraft tasked with observing German river movements reported an unexpected discovery. A farmhouse used occasionally by SOE couriers appeared abandoned, yet its surrounding fields showed signs of recent tire tracks, narrow, consistent with German patrol vehicles. The implications were disturbing. Had the Gestapo arrived first? Or had scientists attempted a rapid evacuation, leaving equipment behind to avoid capture? A post-liberation investigation suggested the Germans had indeed swept the region in December 1942. But curiously, no official German documents mention the capture of scientist personnel. No arrests were logged. No radios matching the network's equipment were catalogued. It was as though the operatives had vanished before the Germans arrived, or had anticipated the sweep so closely that they fled with little more than minutes to spare. This ambiguity left room for theories. Some SOE veterans believed the network dissolved itself intentionally after discovering a traitor in its ranks. Others insisted the Germans ambushed the operatives along the river roads, leaving no witnesses or paperwork. A few historians argue Marchand may have attempted a desperate exfiltration toward unoccupied territory, his radio set abandoned to avoid detection. Today what remains are fragments, a partially decoded final message, reports of empty safe houses, and the eerie consistency of silence. Scientist's disappearance marks one of the most enigmatic collapses of the SOE's mid-war operations, neither confirmed destroyed nor confirmed escaped. And as 1943 dawned, Allied intelligence faced an even greater challenge. In the Netherlands, a new Anglo-American network was preparing to hunt for V-2 launch sites, unaware that it, too, would send one final message before disappearing into history. By early 1943, the war in Europe was entering a new and far more dangerous phase, one defined not only by armies clashing across continents, but by a race to understand and stop Germany's secret weapons program. The V-2 rocket, a technology years ahead of its time, remained shrouded in mystery. Its launch sites were scattered, camouflaged, and constantly moving. In response, Allied intelligence created a specialized Anglo-American network, codenamed Crossbow Field Unit 7, to uncover the hidden infrastructure behind Germany's ballistic ambitions. What happened to that team over the next several months would leave behind a trail of questions that still puzzles investigators today. The Netherlands, still under the tight control of the Wehrmacht and the Gestapo, became the primary hunting ground for the unit. The region's flat landscape and extensive canal system made it ideal for mobile launch platforms and disguised transport routes. Crossbow Field Unit 7 was composed of a mixture of British SOE and American OSS personnel, 4 intelligence officers, 2 wireless operators, and a handful of Dutch railway workers and barge pilots who provided local knowledge. Their base of operations was the Vaal River Corridor, a critical artery for German logistics linking the industrial Ruhr to the northern ports. From the outset, the mission was unusually risky. The Germans had increased patrols in the countryside and along riverbanks, aware that Allied reconnaissance aircraft were searching for signs of V-2 activity. Field Unit 7 relied heavily on clandestine observation posts hidden on farms, in abandoned boathouses, and even inside the attics of sympathetic families. Each member carried forged papers, often claiming to be factory inspectors, canal maintenance workers, or drivers for the organization tote. Failure meant interrogation by the SD, followed by deportation or worse. Their wireless operators used compact Type B2 suitcase radios, concealed in crates of agricultural supplies. Transmissions were carefully timed to avoid detection from German Funkabwehr radio tracking teams, which had become especially active in the Low Countries. One operator, an American named Lieutenant Charles Avery, noted in a surviving field journal, "Transmit only when barges mask the sound. Make the river your alibi." The team relied on the constant motion of river traffic to blend in, treating the Vaal as both lifeline and shield. Throughout the spring of 1943, their reports became steadily more detailed. One transmission identified a convoy of trucks covered with heavy tarps moving nightly between Nijmegen and the forests near Velp, an area the Allies later confirmed had concealed launch preparation sites. Another message warned London that the Germans were experimenting with mobile fueling systems, allowing rockets to be prepared in less than half the usual time. These insights helped shape the broader Allied crossbow strategy, guiding RAF and USAF bombing priorities. But by mid-1943, the tone of the messages changed. In June, Unit 7 sent a coded warning referencing unexpected German security patterns near the river. According to decrypted logs, the team reported unfamiliar patrol routes, increased inspections of barges at random hours, and the presence of plainclothes officers at key canal junctions. Something had altered the German rhythm. Whether it was a local informant, intercepted transmission, or a captured courier was never determined. On the night of July 8, Lieutenant Avery transmitted what would become their final confirmed message. It was shorter than usual, lacking the fluid phrasing of earlier reports. Activity shifting east. Security irregular. Adjusting position. Will signal after movement. The message passed authentication, but analysts in London noted an unusual pressure pattern in the Morse keying, suggesting it may have been transmitted in haste. After that, the line went dead. Over the following week, SOE headquarters attempted contact using emergency broadcast signals. No response. Dutch resistance groups in the area were asked to search discreetly for signs of the operatives: abandoned bicycles, hidden radios, burned papers, fresh tracks near meeting barns. Nothing turned up. The farms that had sheltered the team appeared undisturbed. The river pathways they used showed no evidence of gunfire or forced movement. Post-war investigations produced an uncomfortable mixture of facts and silence. German records from the SD office in Arnhem make no mention of capturing an Allied spy team in July 1943. No equipment matching the team's radios was ever logged. No personal effects were catalogued. One resistance member, interviewed in 1946, claimed to have seen unfamiliar German vehicles near the Waal around the date of the disappearance, but nothing more concrete emerged. The absence of evidence created space for speculation. Some historians believe Unit 7 misread German security shifts and relocated into an area already under surveillance. Others propose the entire team attempted an emergency river crossing under fog, only to be swept downriver and lost, a possibility given the Waal's strong currents. A more unsettling theory suggests the unit may have been compromised from within, leading to a quiet, off-record capture the Germans chose not to document. Whatever the truth, the silence of Crossbow Field Unit 7 deprived Allied planners of one of their most valuable assets at a critical moment. Their final reports, fragmented, tense, abrupt, remain some of the most haunting entries in the Crossbow archives. And as 1944 approached, another Allied network in southern France, larger, more active and deeply embedded with resistance fighters, was about to meet a similarly abrupt and mysterious end. By early 1944, the war in Europe had entered its decisive stage. Allied high command was preparing for the invasion of France, and every scrap of intelligence gathered inside the country carried immense strategic weight. Among the networks feeding London vital information, few were as active or as deeply intertwined with local resistance groups as the SOE's southern circuit known as WWII. Operating across the rugged landscape stretching from Nîmes to Avignon and the Rhône Valley, WWII not only fed intelligence to Britain but also coordinated sabotage operations intended to disrupt German reinforcements ahead of D-Day. But just months before its work would prove most critical, this accomplished network would abruptly fall silent, its leaders vanishing, its safe houses emptied, its future swallowed by an unanswered question. Established in mid-1943 under the direction of Section F, WWII was commanded by Lieutenant Colonel Francis Cammertz, one of the most respected SOE operatives in France. Known for his calm demeanor and meticulous planning, Cammertz turned the circuit into a model of decentralized resistance. Small, independent cells connected only through carefully vetted couriers. This structure protected the network from mass arrests and made it one of the most resilient Allied operations in Vichy and occupied territory. WWII's agents coordinated railway sabotage, supplied weapons drops, and monitored German troop and armor movements feeding into southern France, particularly those routed toward Italy and the Atlantic coast. By late 1943, WWII was at its peak. Its couriers crossed the Rhône under cover of night, delivering messages to Maquis groups in the Luberon and Cévennes. Resistance fighters trained with SOE-supplied Sten guns, Bren light machine guns, and plastic explosives delivered in RAF drop containers. In several cases, WWII coordinated successful derailments east of Avignon, temporarily disrupting German troop movements and drawing the attention of Sicherheitsdienst detectives based in Marseille. But success bred danger. German patrols intensified. The Gestapo established new checkpoints along rural roads and began infiltrating French work brigades to gather information on suspicious activity. Trusted contacts became uncertain. Many locals lived under the strain of constant fear. Fear of betrayal, fear of interrogation, fear that even a misplaced word in a cafe could cost lives. The first signs of trouble appeared in early January 1944. A courier traveling near Orange reported seeing German field police questioning farmers about strangers moving through the vineyards. A resistance leader wrote in his journal, "The pattern is wrong. They are searching for someone, but for whom?" At the same time, WWII intercepted rumors that a captured resistance member had broken under interrogation in Marseille. Whether that individual had any knowledge of Jockey's structure remains a matter of debate. On January 12, Jockey's wireless operator transmitted a brief message to London describing unusual German troop movements near Avignon. The report contradicted German traffic patterns established over the previous month, suggesting either a reallocation of forces or a possible deception effort. The message ended with an unusual closing note, verifying changes. Uncertain intentions. It was the last authenticated transmission ever received from the circuit. Within 48 hours, silence settled over Jockey. Couriers arriving at rendezvous points found empty farmhouses, coffee still warm in cups, blankets thrown aside as if someone had left in haste. In one hideout near Carpentras, a set of code sheets was discovered burned in a fireplace, but the radio equipment was missing. The absence of footprints or signs of struggle perplexed local resistance members who attempted to retrace the operator's steps. It was as if the SOE handlers had vanished from the region overnight. When Allied forces liberated southern France later that summer, investigators attempted to piece together what had happened. Resistance survivors gave conflicting accounts. Some insisted German patrols had swept through the villages near Avignon around the time of the disappearance. Others believed Kammerz had ordered a temporary withdrawal to avoid a suspected informant. But the most puzzling detail came from German archives. No records existed of any SOE arrests or confiscated radios that matched Jockey's equipment during January 1944. Not a single operative was listed as captured. Historians have since proposed several theories. One suggests that the entire network went to ground after detecting signs of German penetration, sacrificing communication with London to preserve the lives of its members. Another points to the possibility of a courier mistakenly leading German agents to a safe house, forcing a rapid evacuation. Some believe a German unit operating independently of Gestapo oversight may have detained or executed the operatives without recording their identities. Regardless of the explanation, the disappearance of Jockey left a dangerous intelligence gap just months before D-Day. Without its reports, London lost insight into troop movements in a critical region where German forces were repositioning in response to Allied deception campaigns. What remains is a mystery preserved through fragments. A final message, abandoned safe houses, and the memories of resistance fighters who never learned why their British contacts failed to return. And yet, Jockey was not the final Allied network to fall silent. As 1944 drew to a close and the Allies pushed toward victory, intelligence officers began compiling the cumulative losses of these missing circuits, an investigation that would reveal an unsettling pattern linking all 5 cases. As 1944 gave way to the final brutal winter of the war, Allied High Command found itself facing an unexpected dilemma, one not on the battlefield, but buried in the shadows of its intelligence apparatus. From London to Washington, analysts began reviewing months' worth of incomplete reports, missing transmissions and abrupt radio silences. When placed side by side, these gaps formed a pattern too distinctive to ignore. 5 Allied spy networks, Prosper, the Tunis Forward Observation Detail, Scientist, Crossbow Field Unit 7, and Jockey, had gone silent under circumstances that defied simple explanation. No captured agents, no seized radios, no definitive German documentation. Instead, each disappearance was marked by the same haunting combination of warning signs, hurried final messages, and vanishing personnel. By the time the Allies advanced into Belgium and liberated most of France, these vanished circuits had become one of the war's most troubling mysteries. In November 1944, British and American intelligence officers gathered at a small operations annex on Duke Street in London to review case files and debrief surviving resistance contacts. The atmosphere was tense. The war was entering its endgame, and every scrap of intelligence was needed to prepare for a final push into Germany. But what concerned the analysts was not simply the loss of manpower, it was the unanswered questions left behind. A senior MI6 liaison wrote in his notes, 5 circuits lost. Circumstances similar. German records incomplete. Possible systemic vulnerability. Another officer from OSS counterintelligence added, these were not novice networks. Their leaders were trained, disciplined, and aware of proper evasion. Their disappearance suggests either coordinated German adaptation or an operational flaw we have not identified. The implication was unsettling. Had the Germans discovered a method for dismantling Allied networks without detection? Or had the Allies underestimated the sophistication of the Reich's counterespionage machinery? The files told a story that was both detailed and incomplete. Prosper had collapsed under the weight of infiltration. Yet even after the war, German archives displayed puzzling omissions about the fate of certain operatives. The Tunis forward observation detail had vanished into a desert without witnesses or enemy records. Scientists' safe houses were found empty before German units reached them. Crossbow Field Unit 7 had simply ceased transmitting, no bodies, no equipment, no reports from Dutch collaborators. Enjaki, despite its size and resilience, left behind only burned code sheets and abandoned carrying cases but no trace of its core personnel. Investigators traveled to France, the Netherlands, and North Africa to gather testimonies. In the Loire Valley, elderly farmers recalled hearing trucks at night during the winter of 1942 but could not confirm whether they belonged to the Gestapo or retreating German units. Near the Vaal River, Dutch resistance members swore that Crossbow Field Unit 7 had relocated before any German patrols arrived. In the Rhone Valley, liberated Maquis fighters insisted that the SOE handlers they knew would never have withdrawn without notifying their local partners. The testimonies contradicted each other, adding to the uncertainty. Complicating matters further was the chaotic nature of German documentation late in the war. Archives had been destroyed, moved, or captured in incomplete state. Many arrests or executions, particularly those carried out by rogue SS officers or mobile security units, were never formally recorded. As one British archivist later wrote, "Absence of evidence is not evidence of absence." The records we possess were shaped by the losing side in the final months of confusion. And yet, silence persisted across all 5 cases, forming a thread too consistent to dismiss. Some Allied officers speculated that the networks had been undone by a combination of environmental dangers, operational strain, and the unpredictability of war. Others suspected the presence of double agents, either embedded within the resistance or operating as German infiltrators posing as Allied couriers. A few, reviewing decrypted signals from German Funkabwehr units, argued that improved radio triangulation techniques may have allowed the Germans to move faster and more discreetly than previously assumed. Yet a more sobering theory emerged among senior intelligence officials, that each network may have detected a threat and attempted rapid relocation, only to be overtaken by circumstances beyond their control. The haste described in their last messages suggested fear, uncertainty, and sudden shifts in enemy behavior. One OSS historian later observed, "These circuits were not defeated by incompetence. They were caught in a moment when the war's tempo changed faster than human intuition could keep pace." By early 1945, the official investigations were folded into broader intelligence assessments. The war was closing, new priorities emerged, and the fate of the vanished network slipped quietly into classified appendices. The files were marked, stored, and in some cases forgotten. But their legacy endured. Modern intelligence doctrine would later emphasize redundancy in communication, stricter authentication measures, and improved exfiltration plans, lessons born directly from these losses. And yet, the core mystery remains. 5 networks, operating in different environments, under different pressures in different years, gone with only fragments left behind. Today, historians still revisit these cases, drawn by the same unanswered questions that troubled Allied analysts in 1944. Were these disappearances the inevitable result of a brutal conflict fought in the shadows? Or do they reveal a deeper, unrecognized vulnerability in Allied clandestine warfare? What remains is silence, the kind that hangs long after the radios stop transmitting, and long after the war itself has ended. A silence that invites not only remembrance, but investigation. And within that silence lies the enduring mystery of the 5 Allied spy networks that went silent during World War II.